a great day, I'm feeling good. Oh, the possibilities of what I could.
What happens when a blind man, a woman of color, and a child of immigrants get together to discuss how diversity, inclusion, and equity affect your business?
I'm moving fast. Oh, I'm optimistic.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Choose Inclusion podcast. I'm UB, and I am the Latino white guy of the group.
I'm Nina. I am the woman of color in the group.
And I'm Mike. I'm the blind guy.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Choose Inclusion. This is Mike Hess, and I am always thrilled to have my co-host with me, Nina and Ubaldo. How are you guys?
Doing okay.
Good morning. Good morning for us. I don't know when people will listen to this, but it's it's a good day. It's nice and sunny here in Denver, Colorado.
Absolutely. We are, again, we get so lucky, honored with the guests that we get, the different perspectives, truly global perspectives when we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging topics. And today we are joined by a gentleman by the name of Mike Lee, who originally is from Honolulu, Hawaii, and now lives in Amsterdam. However, is an engineer, and how I got to know Mike and his work and is really exciting. So Mr. Mike Lee, welcome to our program. How are you doing?
I have nothing to complain about. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you very much.
And how is it in Amsterdam right now?
It's not too bad. It's pretty calm. We're under lockdown, so everyone's pretty quiet for the most part.
Fantastic. And Mike, when we first talked, and I want to bring this up right away because, again, engineer, how does engineer diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, how do they coexist? And our first conversation that we had, 6-8 weeks ago, sometime late 2020, you talked to me about all the tech conferences that you would be part of because you were a subject matter expert within technology. So you were asked to speak at all these conferences across the globe, and you use that platform and your prowess to actually talk about a diversity, equity, and inclusion type conversation. And quite honestly, Mike, I thought that was fascinating because I've been to a ton of tech conferences and I've not seen somebody so bold to say, you know what, this matters to me and this is relevant to all of us to think about. So do you mind just kind of kicking off the program with a little bit about your backstory, and then B, what kind of led you to doing that? Because I thought that was fascinating.
Sure. Yeah, I'll give the very shortened version. I grew up in Honolulu. I'm, mixed race kid, half white, half Japanese. So it was nice to be in a, kind of multi-ethnic place like Hawaii. And, unfortunately, you have sort of this post-colonial economy that is very difficult to make any kind of creative living in. And so, like many, I ended up moving to the mainland, at first to Seattle and then down to Silicon Valley, eventually ending up at Apple. And, it was a very interesting road because, rather than sort of like coming from a traditional background of, university study, I really, found myself just by dint of my size and where I happened to live in the world, I was just part of labor. And so I just sort of lifted things for a living. And that was how I made my way through life until eventually I, sort of looked at the situation around me and realized, the work that I'm in, it pays well, but it's dangerous. Eventually I'm going to get injured, possibly killed. People around me are dying. I don't want to be next. I'm going to take people's advice and, learn a skill. And the skill that I was able to learn was, programming, and then eventually through a 3-year apprenticeship, software engineering. like you said, that enabled me to go to conferences and travel all over the world, meet all kinds of people on all sides of, technology. And, to me, I have had almost since the beginning of my career this real kind of community spirit and feeling when it comes to software and craftsmanship in general. And so I really uh, felt like the people who were talking to me about what they were dealing with technology, they weren't only there to sort of like get my take and my advice, they were really there to get sort of like the sum of the advice of all of the people who I had spoken to, and all that we had learned from sort of like their problems, and at the same time take the things that they were thinking about and sort of like share that with the with the greater crowd. And so because of that, like things that I think that people were just sort of like concerned about or thinking about, started coming to bear. And so about 2014, I ended up speaking on the subject of ethics, which is so, the thing is, all of my talks, they're sort of non-technical in the sense that right when I kind of started my speaking career, I ended up working at Apple. And, at the time, the thinking was that I would be able to continue speaking, but I couldn't talk about like the company or its products anymore. And so I had to find some other way to, speak to this community that I loved and, educate them and sort of like transmit information, but at the same time, not really talk about, all of the stuff that we're sort of here to talk about. And as funny as that sounds, it actually ends up with something that I think sort of like lasts a little bit longer, because the latest technology sort of changes, and after a few years, that information is not really useful. But sort of the general thought about the craft and information about sort of like how the system as a whole works, that is information that you can sort of carry forward, for years and years. So I really came to love kind of doing these talks. And, because I'm interested in Apple, and Mike Marcola was a, very important person in the sort of co-founding of Apple. And he started a ethics program at, I think it was Santa Clara University, that came to my attention being in Silicon Valley. And I thought, I should give a talk about ethics. And so I sort of pulled together, information that I learned from studying ethics in, college, because I had originally wanted to be a doctor. And then, things that I had learned from sort of like podcasts and media and information, and kind of like taking all of that, kind of like presenting this kind of like talk about ethics and applying that to sort of like our community. And at the same time, thought it would be fun to, be part of or lead a panel about ethics. And during that panel, talking about, the stuff that we were doing, I just really came to this conclusion, like really live on stage, that I didn't think that we could do what we were doing ethically. And so because of that, I felt like I didn't want to participate in technology production anymore. And it was really kind of this, what I thought at the time would be a very strange conclusion. But then what ended up sort of turning into me having this, kind of like reversal after reading Octavia Butler, who sort of posited that, change is what's going to happen. And you can either shape change or you can let other people shape change for you. And so being an engineer, I mean, shaping change is exactly what the job entails. And so I started looking at, the world's actual problems, and, the sort of like one that stares you in the face is climate change. And so I started looking into climate change and, reading papers about it and understanding how we understand using computers what we know about climate change. And so I gave a presentation about this model, which has been running for like 45 years now and has been proven to be like extremely accurate. And what sort of that showed about what we know about climate change. And it's like, the way that we're going, the system is going to collapse, and here's the day when it's going to collapse. Or if we just sort of throttle back a little bit, then it'll level out and we'll be fine. But if we were to sort of like double down and just sort of keep growing like this, then we'll buy ourselves a little time, but then we'll basically like plunge off a cliff, and almost everybody will die. And so I gave that presentation, which was very technical. So people enjoyed that, but then at the same time, people started asking me like, well, okay, well, like given that, like, what am I as an engineer is supposed to do. And so I started looking into what exactly, technology was doing about climate change. And this was on my sort of planetary engineering talk, about how we as, engineers on the whole, technologists on the whole, can and are trying to fix this problem. But at the same time, how we as just sort of people who just sort of write software, or for that matter, just are doing our jobs, and not really, holding any kind of sway over things, sort of what do we have to do with it? And so with that question, and, my sort of travels continuing, I was able to go with the Dutch embassy to Curaçao, which had been a sort of, place where, slaves had once been traded. And, that I thought was very interesting. I'd never been to such a place. And, I had sort of two choices of what to do with my free day. I could either go to the beach, or I could go to the slavery museum. And, for me, it was an easy choice. I mean, I'm from Hawaii. I'm not really impressed by any particular beach. And anyway, I've had my fill. But on the other hand, I've never been to a slavery museum. For me, it was really this eye-opening experience, because it was really like the thread that kind of pulled everything together. Everything I had learned about sort of the invention of nature by Alexander von Humboldt, and when he stood on a mountain in 1802 and realized, this isn't a clockwork book by God. It's a giant web of organisms that are all interrelated. And if we keep destroying things like we're doing, we're going to change the climate using slaves. And that's, what it was at the time, using slaves. And how that sort of idea and thread has, kind of come through everything, not just with technology, but just sort of with everything. For me, it was just a giant revelation. And so I just sort of continued doing what I was doing, and presented what I had learned in, the most sort of humble way possible, to the people who were there assembled. And, yes, to say that it was something that was not expected at a tech conference goes without saying. But at the same time, for me, that conference is something that I have been involved with since the very beginning. And the very specific idea of that conference, called the AltConf, is to basically provide sort of a seventh stage to what Apple is doing with their, huge tech conference. And even though, only 10,000 people are able to physically go there, what is sort of done and spoken about at that conference has major consequences for the rest of the world. And the ideas that sort of apply to the people who are doing that sort of thing, such as myself, are at the same time widely applicable to sort of everybody who does kind of everything. And so this is the perfect place to attach an idea that is as relevant to technology as any API or new piece of hardware, or anything else. This is sort of the key to understanding it all. That has just very much continued, to the point where now with this, pandemic, which, also related to climate change, is given, like it or not, the time to do something. And one can only make so much bread. So, I just learned as much as I could about this subject, and about sort of, the broader ideas around, diversity and inclusion, not just sort of in terms of, my industry, where it's definitely a very relevant thing, but in terms of what my industry produces for the world, which, is the sort of implementation level of where all of this stuff kind of has to be done. So, even though it sounds at the end of the day all very noble, for me, and sort of the type of person I am and the way that my brain works, it's just kind of what makes sense. It's just what follows. I wasn't trying to be controversial. I was just sort of following the facts to where they seem to lead, and presenting the relevance to to all of us. And when I say all of us, I really do mean all of us, because at the end of the day, climate change is caused by fossil fuels and we're all responsible for that. And even if we try to avoid that and pat ourselves on the back, at the end of the day, we're part of the system, and the system is, consuming these fuels that's going to choke us and kill our, descendants. And so, we can either let the world end or we can, do something about it. And I'm sort of a do something about it kind of person. And so that's how I am. And so I sort of spend my time, when I'm not sort of like doing my work in the most sort of ethically way possible, I'm also trying to talk to as many people as I can about what they're doing and sort of help them understand, how their work has kind of a role in this kind of greater system, and, help them understand this idea of, slavery and this great sort of like, thing that happened that affects sort of like everything unto this day, in a way that they can understand, because oil is the exact same sort of feeling as slavery, where it's something that we know is terrible, but it's nothing that we feel like we can do anything about because the entire economy is built on it. And so we all just sort of continue doing our thing and, finding the best way possible to either ignore it or pat ourselves on the back for some, minor thing, which ultimately, has whatever effect that it has. Yeah, so that's me.
All right, Mike, that was a lot to unpack. So thank you for all of that context and everything. I'm going to dive in on a specific angle of one of the many points you brought up. And so one of the things that I like that you're talking about is kind of the historical threads that you can see attached to, that has led up to the historical systemic inequities, slavery, colonialism, all that stuff, how it connects to what tech is today and how it's being used. And so I was wondering, could you give us, in this world where Twitter is shutting people out and Facebook and, a lot of tech companies in the last year have started stepping up and starting to talk about ethics, and a lot of companies have failed ethically in the last year, a lot of tech companies. Can you talk to us a little bit about like how are tech companies, exactly what are the things that they're doing that are kind of promoting these systemic inequities, and like what should they be doing to change that?
Well, I mean, it's almost kind of the wrong question, because it kind of takes for granted that they're sort of intentionally, trying to do, anything to do with any of this. But the reality of things is that you don't really have to be, trying to cause inequity or trying to be racist or trying to, anything else. You just have to be sort of doing your thing. Because the system we're all part of has all of this stuff just kind of all built into it. And so what it really comes down to is putting some energy and effort into learning about these things that happened and these threads that are running and paying attention to, how the system actually works, and sort of like giving yourself kind of this, this reality check that is painful at first, but is ultimately very powerful, in your ability to sort of do anything with it, hopefully fix it. So I think that like tech companies in general, like we can talk about a tech company being ethical or not ethical, but at the end of the day, they're going to bend that, define that, or discard that as is necessary to make the next business decision. What we really need to talk about is having all of the people in that company having a very thorough understanding and inbuilt compass for and feeling for ethics, and taking those things into consideration and learning about the history and what happened and what that led to, the inequality, the racism, all of the things that have been invented and given to us so that we'll turn against each other and not pay attention to what's actually happening, and the very small amount of people who are actually sort of like, don't want to say making that happen, because at the end of the day, that's what we're all doing together, but, benefiting from it at the end of the day. When you say like, why is all of this stuff happening? It's, yeah, because we're all enjoying it, but it's also because, somebody is making an awful lot of money. So I think when we are looking at a tech industry that is built around this idea of infinite growth and becoming one of the people who has an infinite giant amount of money, again, I think that that's just sort of not a very good way of looking at it. It really comes down to kind of we as individuals making decisions for ourselves and trying to do so in an as ethical and informed way as possible. And it's like with COVID. I'm not letting it ruin my life. I'm letting it change my life. But at the end of the day, I just don't want to die from being stupid, right? Like I don't want to die from like not taking the barest precautions, thinking that every rule is something that I need to work around just because it exists, and really sort of paying attention to like what are my motivations. I don't have much time. None of us have much time. Things are on a big downhill trajectory. Everything's fucked. But we can understand why it's fucked and how it's fucked, and actually start unfucking it, and make ourselves into these sort of engines of kind of anti-racism, anti-suck, and anti. I don't want to say anti-capitalist, but just sort of like anti-insanity, right? Like we just need to be kind of realists, because in being realists, we have sort of the power. And talking about this to people in the tech industry, it's very much sort of gone from I don't think that climate change is a thing that exists or that it's going to happen, in our lifetimes, to I don't think that there's anything that we can do about it. And both of those are sort of like the same underlying idea, which is sort of your brain saying, yeah, I don't want to do anything, because that's kind of what the brain wants to do. Like, studying like neuroscience and how the brain works is sort of another part of, understanding how, kind of like all of these, systems work. And, that all sort of like loops back into, software, because at the end of the day, the people who are writing the software are the people who are, enabling this person's workflow or that person's workflow. They're giving us ways to more efficiently spending our time doing, something or another, for the benefit of the many or the few, solving the problems that need to be solved, or just sort of frittering it away, for fake internet points or fake whatever points, because at the end of the day, if we can't live on this planet anymore, then whatever number tallies we're using to pretend that one of us is better than the other, it's not going to mean anything other than the amount that it held us back from actually solving this problem. And I just don't want to look like an idiot as a species any more than I want to look like an idiot as a person, or as an entrepreneur, or as a software developer. So for me, it's not just sort of about, what I'm doing when I'm doing my work and applying that, but talking to my colleagues about that, and how they're sort of doing their work, and, as much as possible, trying to sort of transmit these ideas, that we need to sort of change our way of thinking, and take responsibility for our part of the system, so that we can actually change this thing before, some guys on a yacht with a bunch of robots that we built drive this thing off of a cliff.
My fear is that aliens already think we're a species of idiots, sadly, but I think we can get out of it. We still have time to evolve. I mean, what I love, what I'm pulling out of everything you're talking about, Mike, is at the end of the day, and I think this is a concept that can impact our audience, which is that everything is interconnected, right? To your point, like you've done all of this research and study, and have found connections and ways that all of us impact everything around us. And I think that's what a lot of people doing this DEI work, whether as a solopreneur or in their organization, is they don't feel like there's much of an impact, right? That they're not really, that the DEI doesn't really have far-reaching impact throughout the organization, when in reality it does. And I think that's just such a great way to look at it, is that we all can, if we all kind of band together to do this work, then we can impact. And it should, right? Like DEI should flow through everything throughout an organization, for example, because then it can inform and do what you're trying to do, which is just get people to be a little better. But I think you have to believe that it's the work that you're doing is absolutely impacting everybody and everything around you. And I think it has to start there in order for the work then to truly be meaningful, and so that you don't give up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. And like to your point of everything being related, right? Where it's like, there's what you're doing, with yourself, your sort of internal work, how you're living your own life, treating your own body, and then there's sort of the external, system, as it were. And we talk about like this concept of mindfulness, of paying attention to what's going on in your body and what you're feeling and what you're thinking and what's going on around you, and like what you're actually experiencing, rather than just sort of like letting some lower level nervous parts of your nervous system like sort of steer things around without your consciousness actually involved. And so as we are being mindful of how we're living our lives, and being mindful of kind of like the barriers and inconveniences, and if we're very enlightened, our sort of privilege and the sort of inequities, but basically being aware not just of sort of like yourself and your experience moving through life, but also just sort of like the other experiences of other people sort of moving through life, and then eventually sort of getting yourself this power, hopefully by dint of skill, and not just sort of like how much money you were born with, but like the ability to actually make change in that system, whether that's by creating an app, or creating a social movement, or creating a business, or whatever it is that you sort of are spending your very limited amount of time with, when you're not with your friends and family. And so yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that I think I'm hearing kind of coming out of this conversation is that the power of knowledge and individuals to really educate themselves to be able to change the entire discourse for how we're talking about all the work that we all do individually. So the concept of the Overton window was the thing that came to my mind for this. So for those of you who don't know what the Overton window is, the Overton window is this kind of range of policies and ideas that are kind of politically acceptable to a mainstream population at a given time. So it's also known as the window of discourse. So basically this window shifts all the time based on what's kind of popular. And so there are times in our world where things that are kind of more progressive are considered more mainstream, and things that are more conservative. But what we need to be doing is shifting that Overton window, where DEI is just part of that kind of mainstream conversation, that understanding that this is all connected is part of that mainstream conversation, and that's the default in how we talk about this, as opposed to it being an idea that's on the edge of conversations.
Right.
I'm sorry, Mike. I still appreciate that, Nina. And that's, again, when I first talked to you, Mike, again, and I know you're like, well, this is just what I've always done. However, again, that just, it is kind of that unicorn conversation in tech conferences. So that's what really drew me to your way of thinking. And that, yeah, just because you're an engineer and a so-called left brain thinker, that sort of thing, like, recognizing like these topics are for everybody. It's not just for a certain group of people.
Yeah, so like I was just going to say exactly this idea of sort of like how we talk about this stuff and how we think about this stuff. It's like people are not inconveniencing us when they bring their D&I issues to us, right? Like people are giving us the benefit of their perspective, so we can make things that are better in different situations and from different angles, which we may very well find ourselves in the future, right? Like all of these classic examples of like we're not cutting curbs with ramps for the benefit of people in wheelchairs. People in wheelchairs pointed out to us that if we put a ramp here, it would be a lot easier for people who don't walk around on legs. And the fact that we all have a suitcase once in a while is just sort of a benefit that we realize, without realizing it, because they were the ones who pointed it out, because they were the ones who experienced this sort of life more often than that. And so like mostly when I hear people sort of like talking about this on either a business level or sort of like around the, the pub level, they're thinking of it in terms of like, why are we spending all of this time and energy and money trying to accommodate this very small number of people? And that's not just true of like dealing with people who have, mobility experiences, but also people, who are having sort of like racial or class, experiences. Because, this idea of like, why do we have to like, bend everything, for these like whining people? It's like, this is the opposite way of looking at it. It's just like when we're making software and people are filing bugs. They're not complaints, to annoy us. We are so grateful for this information that enables us to be better, to be the sort of like level of excellence that we are, trying to achieve for ourselves, or at least sort of claiming to have or be. And so like that for me is like a big part of that message, is trying to, turn people's heads around. And to your point, it doesn't really matter if you're in software, or in service. It's all about sort of like how, the way that we think about each other, and the way that we sort of like view, taking other people into consideration, whether that's on a personal or on a very professional level, and recognizing when we have the privilege of being the people who actually can make the kinds of decisions that will actually influence a large number of people, whether it's at sort of like the city or the software level.
I think that's a perfect way to end the episode, because it's inspiring, right? Like we can all absolutely come together, and if we think about it in this way, and if we approach our work in this way, the impact will be felt far and wide. So Mike, Lee, thank you very, very much for your time. So glad we got to connect in the new year. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been my very great honor to have this ability to get some of these ideas out there to your audience.
Fantastic. Well, as always, thank you, Choose Inclusion listeners. We really appreciate your just your willingness to expand your thoughts and ideas, and please share these ideas, because we all have a part of this, and it seems so daunting until you realize, like, a little bit of action like Mike Lee took. You have a voice, you have a platform. Feel free to share, because from thoughts to words to actions, that's how we do change the course of the direction we're going right now. So Mike Lee, thank you. Ubaldo, Nina, so honored to be part of this amazing platform. So thank you guys. And we'll talk to you guys next time.
Thanks for listening to the Choose Inclusion podcast. Make sure to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And you can see closed captioning for this podcast on our YouTube channel. You can find us online on our website, chooseinclusion.com, and contact us on Twitter @ChooseInclusion.